Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So my final picks for week 15 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. Let's be honest, there's a good chance these aren't my final picks because with all the COVID and injury news we have heading to the weekend, a lot of this could end up changing. So it's definitely a tough week to sift through, but we'll try our best. We'll use the information that we have right now to make the best possible decisions for this weekend. But if you find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Optimizers, ownership projections, cheat sheets, data sheets, color coordination, so it's quite easy to follow. Link can be found down below, not just for the NFL, but the NBA, MLB, and NASCAR as well. So if you want to check it out, you know where to find it. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're new signing over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. They're also running that 12 days of Pickmas promo, which I have taken advantage of so far. Last night they did 2 promos on quarterback props, 25% off Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. So I've been taking advantage of those props each and every single day. And I mean, you already get the sign-up bonus, and you might as well use that to your advantage because right now is probably the best time to sign up because I don't think we're going to get promos each and every single day for quite some time, maybe until next Christmas. So I do highly recommend it, and it's quite fun to play on. I think the lines are quite soft. But I think it'll be after the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position. I wouldn't say it's super deep this week, but I think depending on which roster construction you want to go with, whether you want to spend up, right in the middle, or down low, you have options this weekend. So we'll start up top with Kyler Murray. Yes, Josh Allen does exist. He's an option if you do want to spend up. We just got news that he's going to practice fully today despite the foot injury, so he's definitely an option versus Carolina. But if I am spending up this weekend, I'd rather save a couple of bucks and go with Kyler Murray here at $7,900. Ever since returning from injury, he's been using his legs. Around 60 rushing yards the past 2 weeks, 120 total. And now he faces Detroit, a defense that won't really offer too much resistance. He didn't have any touchdowns last week, but he's still nearly 400 passing yards and 60 rushing yards. Still good for around 23 DraftKings points. Like typically with Kyler, the floor is pretty high. He will be without DeAndre Hopkins this week, which does kind of suck. He's obviously one of the best wide receivers in football. But the way this Cardinals offense is, they spread the ball around so much. Like Hopkins is only averaging around 5 targets per game, so I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. Hopkins is out. Christian Kirk, AJ Green, I think, can step in nicely. Also, Rondale Moore will get a little bit of boost, and Zach Ertz as well. Not sure if Chase Evans will be back or not yet. We'll kind of save that for the running back discussion, but I mean, no reason not to like Kyler here. They have the highest implied team total on the slate, 30 points. They are 12.5-point favorites, averaging nearly 280 passing yards per game this year and close to 30 rushing yards. Like earlier in the season, he just really wasn't running the ball too much, and that kind of faded away before missing a few weeks with an injury. But the past 2 weeks have been quite encouraging. And the Lions, awful versus the run, awful versus the pass, currently 30th DVA versus the pass this season. So if you are spending up, Kyler is the guy I like the most. Then going toward the mid-range here, which is probably a good spot to be in this weekend because a few of these guys are just way too cheap. And I think Tua is a little bit too cheap as well. I think Kyler is priced right now where he should be. So I wouldn't say he's a value or anything. But I do like Stafford here at $7,000. Now, the problem is the Rams are really hit with COVID right now. Odell is going to be out for this game. But for the most part, the passing attack, besides Odell, looks like we're going to be safe. Hopefully not going to jinx anything because I would hate to see Cooper Kupp land on the COVID list within like the next couple hours. But no one is safe right now. Everyone is getting added on the COVID list. Taylor Heineke just got into the list about 30 minutes ago. So no one is safe. But as for right now, it looks like we're going to have Van Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, and Tyler Higbee, which is good enough for me to like Matthew Stafford. And at $7,000, he has 3 touchdowns the past 3 weeks. Good for 20-some DraftKings points. He's facing Seattle here, which you really shouldn't be scared of too much. They're in the 425 time slot, which I'm just a sucker for the late games. So I don't see a reason really not to like Stafford here. The total at 24.5, it has gotten lower, which I get because COVID is hitting the team. But this is a guy averaging around 300 passing yards and 2.5 passing touchdowns per game. He's got elite weapons to get the ball to. Seattle is currently 28th DVA versus the pass this season, allowing 290 passing yards per game. Just not many touchdowns, which is why they're tied for 11th in fantasy points allowed per game. But I do like Stafford a lot. I think he's finding cash games or tournaments. Jalen Hurts, $6,600. We do not know if he's going to start yet or not. It sounds like he is trending in the right direction to get a limited practice in, assuming he is good to go versus Washington. They've been awful versus quarterbacks this year, and Hurts is kind of like Kyler Murray. I like to call him like an off-brand Kyler Murray because Kyler Murray is a good passer. Jalen Hurts, not so much, but he's great with his legs, just like Kyler Murray just doesn't have that passing ability as much. And he's got weapons and Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith, but I would say Kyler Murray's team is definitely a bit better. But Jalen Hurts definitely on my radar, averaging close to 60 rushing yards per game this year. Always a good chance for a rushing touchdown. Plus Washington allowing the most points per game to the quarterback position, as well as being 27th DV versus the pass. So if he's fully good to go, full health, I like Jalen Hurts at that price point. It could be a solid cash game quarterback. And they have a team total of 26. So, I mean, points should definitely be scored here from the Eagles. Dak Prescott, $6,500. I could see using him in cash or tournaments. He does not have the rushing upside that Jalen Hurts has, but he's definitely a way better passer. And he's got great weapons to get the ball to in CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and Dalton Schultz. Cedric Wilson currently on the COVID list. But facing the Giants, I mean, their defense is nothing to really be too scared of here. And I think Dak is just way too cheap. And it's really easy to stack him up because his pass catching options usually aren't that expensive. The Giants are 10th DA versus the pass this year, 19th versus quarterbacks. But this is not a defense I would fear. And early in the season, Dak Prescott did have a pretty solid game versus them. But if you're using Dak, just throwing a couple pass catching options, run it back with someone in the Giants, maybe like a Sterling Shepard, I think it's a pretty good way to go in tournaments. I could see playing Dak Prescott in cash games at $6,500, but he can definitely be a little bit more up or down than what you'd expect because there is games where Dak will have like 9 to 12 points and the Cowboys still score like 30 real life points. So gotta be a little bit careful there, which is why I kind of lean towards tournaments, but you could play him in cash games. If you are going cheap this weekend, I think Tua is cash viable at $5,700. It does suck that he lost Jalen Waddle because obviously him and Jalen Waddle have an excellent connection. He's been killing it so far this year, but he's still facing the Jets, so it's like we should be really concerned there. Still a 25.25 team total. And the Jets in the season, dead last, 32nd DVA versus the pass, and 23rd versus quarterbacks. Plus Devontae Parker is going to be very, very popular this weekend, rightly so. So if you just want to pair him up with Tua, it's a very, very cheap stack with a lot of upside in my opinion. And moving on to the running back position, this might be the worst running back slate of the season. Now, if these guys end up being healthy, we do have some solid plays, but as of right now, this is just fully question marks. And if you actually look at the running back page on DraftKings, it looks like any NBA DFS slate where every single guy is questionable, doubtful, or out. Like, there is a very lack of options on this slate. Like, pretty much every single guy on here is about questionable. James Conner's questionable. He didn't practice yesterday. Eli Mitchell has not been practicing. He has been doing some work on the sideline, but he still has the pass concussion protocol. Antonio Gibson's healthy, but he did fumble last week and he got benched for a little bit. Henderson's still on the COVID list. Sonny Michel's healthy, but he's not a play if Henderson happens to play. A.J. Dillon, he's barring any news on Aaron Jones. James Robinson's healthy. Chase Edmonds is yet to be activated off the IR. And Michael Carter, who actually just got news that he did get activated, will have a significant workload. So this whole list is just a complete mess right now. So we're starting with James Conner, $6,400. He has been amazing. He just keeps scoring touchdowns. I don't think he's that great, but he keeps producing, and I don't have any emotions when it comes to DFS. If you've been producing and you're a good spot, the price is right, and the workload's there, I have to like you. Like, I don't think James Conner is great, but he did kind of win me over on that one-handed snag he had early in the game on that Texas route. But $6,400. If Edmonds is not active and James Conner plays, no, he's banged up, but if he plays, you have to assume he's going to get a full-on workload. $6,400 versus Detroit's too cheap. It's like a 10 or 12 point favorite here. He's on the road in Detroit, but they're currently at 12.5 point favorites with a 30-point implied team total. James Conner he scores touchdowns every week. He has over a rushing touchdown per game this season, and he had 9 targets last week, caught 9 of them for nearly 100 yards. So, yeah, if he plays and Chase Edmonds is not active, I mean, you got to like him. If Chase Edmonds is active, I still think James Conner is playable, but Edmonds will be a pass-catching back, which just take away from James Conner. But James Conner will probably score a touchdown, so whatever. You could still probably play him, but if Edmonds is out, I do like Conner a lot. If Conner happened to be out and Edmonds played, Edmonds is arguably one of, if not the best running back play on the slate, $5,100, because you're probably expecting 15-plus carries, and I would say 5-plus targets. And that price versus Detroit, yeah, it looks pretty darn good. So it's kind of like the situation for the Cardinals, just a bunch of ifs and then statements there. For the 49ers, Eli Mitchell, like we just talked about, is he at the practice? Still has the pass concussion protocol. If he's good to go, Shanahan will run this guy into the ground. No worries about that. He'll have like 20-plus carries. Facing the Falcons, 28-point implied team total, 9.5-point favorites. Looking at how the run defense is for the Falcons so far this year. Didn't really mention it with the Lions, but they're pretty awful. I think everyone expects that. The Lions are 29th DVOA and 29th versus running backs. The Falcons are 23rd DVOA and 24th versus running backs. But Eli Mitchell, if he is good to go, $6,200 is too cheap for him. If he happens to be out, you can look at Jeff Wilson again, although I hate trusting Jeff Wilson because he does not catch passes, and you really have to just score a touchdown for him to be viable. Eli Mitchell, though, I'm more comfortable with this workload. So hopefully he plays. If not, we'll have to talk about other situations there. Antonio Gibson at $6,000. Awful team total here for the football team. 16.5, 9.5-point dogs. Also, Taylor Heineke is out. So we have Garrett Gilbert slated to start for the football team. So I'm not expecting a lot of points to be scored from them. So Antonio Gibson, I mean, he looked better earlier in the week, but it's looking like it's going to be a rough one here for Washington. But McKissick still hasn't practiced yet. So if he happens to be out again, Antonio Gibson is going to get a large workload. Now, Wendell Smallwood, he was involved more than we would have liked him to last week, and Antonio Gibson did bust his chalk, but Philly is not a team you should be scared about using running backs against. I know Gibson's a great pass catcher, and the Eagles are allowing nearly 7 catches per game to running back, so if McKissick is out, Antonio Gibson is once again a very solid play, but probably going to be a really rough situation for them getting into actually like the red zone for touchdowns. So we're going to hope Gibson gets some dump offs and maybe bust one, just like a long touchdown or something. As for the Rams, Henderson or Michelle, whoever starts here is going to be a great play versus Seattle. They have not been good versus running backs this year. They haven't been great versus pass catching running backs either, allowing really 7.5 catches and 70 receiving yards, specifically to running backs this year. They're also allowing the second most points per game despite being 9th versus the pass. So it really just depends on who starts. We have no news on Henderson yet. He's still on the COVID list, but if he gets activated, assuming he is going to be the main guy, $1,500 is a little bit too cheap. He's also involved in the passing game if he happens to be out. So Michelle once again becomes a great play. A.J. Dillon depends on the Aaron Jones news. If Aaron Jones is out, A.J. Dillon, one of the best plays running back at $5,700 because we'll probably get you close to 30 touches, to be honest, and involved in the passing game. So I would love A.J. Dillon, but I have to wait and see on Aaron Jones. He missed yesterday's practice with an illness. So right now we do not know because we do not have the practice report yet. We'll probably know that in probably about an hour, but I had to record this now. James Robinson right now is looking like the chalk play at running back. Urban Meyer got fired, so James Robinson is officially freed. Whatever reason it was, Urban Meyer did not like James Robinson. He was just not given the ball. Anytime he fumbled, straight to the bench, Carlos Hyde season. But the interim head coach said that James Robinson will be treated as the main running back, and hey, sign me up against Houston. Like, this is one of those games where Jacksonville will probably not trail. They'll actually be able to establish the run a little bit. They are 5.5-point favorites at home. Not scared of their run defense. 28th versus the run and 28th versus running backs, allowing nearly 130 rushing yards per game. So James Robinson, sign me up. I think he's a fantastic play. Chase Evans, we already talked about with James Conner. Michael Carter, he just got he was designated to return, but Coach just said like 5 minutes ago that he is expected to see a heavy workload in this game. And at $4,700 versus Miami, a guy that can catch passes, he's definitely playable at $4,700 on a slate that's this bad at running back. As of right now, the slate could get better, but it's just a mess trying to sift through all the guys that are questionable, who's going to play and who's not. And moving on to the wide receiver position, as I always say, I try to keep this simple because it really depends on what your stacks look like, your roster construction, and what kind of quarterbacks you're using. Because if you have a specific quarterback, you want to correlate them with their pass catching options, then more than likely run it back with someone from the opposing team. So, for example, this weekend, Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp, probably my favorite stack on the slate. Who am I going to run that back with? DK Metcalf at $6,200 with no Tyler Lockett. Like, that's how I kind of view the wide receiver position. In cash games, yes, you don't have to do that. I target some of these guys as one-offs, like Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp. Like, you can one-off these guys. DK Metcalf this weekend because no Tyler Lockett's definitely a big boost for him. But you guys kind of get the idea. So if you're using Stafford, get Cooper Kupp. And I don't have to tell you guys Cooper Kupp is good. At $9,000, he is the best point per dollar play at the wide receiver position. Currently, my projections. Like, that just tells you how good Cooper Kupp is. You're always going to get typically 7, 8 plus catches, over 100 yards, 10 plus targets, and probably find the end zone once or twice. Like, that's just what Cooper Kupp does, and there's no denying it at this point. So I really think it's pretty easy to fit him in this week because we have cheap quarterbacks we can play, and I don't see any good spin of running backs. So we have to spend some money somewhere, and Cooper Kupp is just probably going to be, I would be shocked if he's not the highest owned player on the slate this weekend. Devontae Adams, you probably can't play both, so he's just a direct pivot in tournaments. You don't have to play Aaron Rodgers because if you play Devontae Adams, you're pretty much just soaking up all of Aaron Rodgers' points anyway, so I kind of usually just one-off Devontae Adams. Deebo Samuel in play versus Atlanta, their secondary. I mean, they've kind of been giving up a lot of points this season versus the pass, and he's also used as a running back a little bit. If Eli Mitchell happened to be out, I would say it's a boost for Deebo Samuel, but he's fine either way. Deontay Johnson going against the Titans, who are allowing the second most points per game to the wide receiver position so far this year. 43.3 points, 31st, and allowing nearly 200 receiving yards. So Deontay Johnson, a guy that typically sees 12-plus targets almost every single week, is in play at $7,500. Now, they did price him up. He's typically living in that mid-6K range, which always makes him look like a great play. So at $7,500, I think he'll be lower owned than he should be, but I think he's a great tournament play. CeeDee Lamb, if you're stacking up the Cowboys, I mean, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Murray Cooper, Michael Gallup, all those guys are fine plays, and you can run it back with a guy like Sterling Shepard. Even though the Cowboys are first year versus the pass this season, they've still given up plenty of points versus the wide receiver position. Actually, 26 versus wide receivers, allowing nearly 200 receiving yards per game, despite being first DVA versus the pass. DK Metcalf, no Tyler Lockett. I think I already mentioned that twice, but I mean, the Rams haven't been that good versus wide receivers anyway, so Metcalf at $6,200, way too cheap. I'd expect him to be quite chalky on this slate, plus he correlates well with Cooper Kupp. AJ Green and Christian Kirk do see bumps with no DeAndre Hopkins or facing Detroit. If you're playing Kyler, you can play him naked because of the rushing upside, but if you do want pass-catching options, Green and Kirk are my favorite choices as of right now, and AJ Green actually had a great game on Monday night. Already talked about Shepard. Devontae Parker is pretty much a cash game lock for me. Just a great spot here versus the Jets. They're 32nd DVA versus the pass. They haven't been terrible versus wide receivers this year, but teams usually just get up on the Jets, so they just run the ball. So, I mean, they're not a good pass defense. So, Devontae Parker, $4,300 with no Jalen Waddle. I mean, that's huge not having Waddle because he's a guy that soaks up a lot of targets and a lot of usage in this offense. And on the season, in the games that Parker has played, he's averaging close to 8 targets per game and a 21.5% target share. I'd be kind of shocked if he doesn't see like 10 plus targets in this game. We might not see like 12, but I think 8 to 10 is probably a good range for Parker this weekend. And then Laquan Treadwell here at $3,300 facing Houston. He's actually been sneakily getting targets. Now, new coach, so things might change a little bit, but at $3,300, if they get you 5 plus targets and he connects on a few of them and maybe hits a deep play, that's not bad. I'm not really recommending Treadwell. I don't think he's a cash game play. Parker's as low as I'm getting in cash games, but Treadwell is interesting, I think. You can also look at Laviska Shenault. Maybe Urban Meyer is going to help him out as well, but I think Treadwell at that price point is somewhat viable on this slate. And moving on to the tight end position, it's definitely not great this week. Tyler Higbee projects as my most optimal play. Odell Beckham Jr. being out does help that. Plus, Seattle has not been good versus tight ends this year. I wouldn't say he's an amazing play, but at $4,000, I don't think he's bad. You go all the way up top, George Kittle, $7,500. I just remember a couple weeks ago he was $5,900. I think it was versus Seattle where he just absolutely went off, but then he went off last week as well versus Cincy. He definitely deserves this price point. He's been killing it. And now he's facing Atlanta, not scared of their defense. I mean, Kittle, he's going to get you around 10 plus targets and just crush defenses like he has the past couple of weeks. Doesn't feel good, but in tournaments, I definitely think he's in play. It just never feels good paying nearly $8,000 for a tight end, but Kittle he's one of those guys that's built different. He can do a lot of things out there. He's one of the most athletically gifted tight ends I've ever seen play. Dallas Goedert, $5,300. If you are using Jalen Hurts and you want a pass-catching option with him, Goddard's my preferred option here versus Washington. They've been terrible versus receivers, so I mean that puts Smith in play. But Goddard, he's probably the safest bet on this offense so far this season. The football team actually has been kind of stingy versus tight ends, but I'm not really one to care about matchups too much. I'd just rather take the talent. We know Goddard's a good tight end, and they have a high implied team total this week. Mike Gesicki, $5,000. No Jalen Waddle. Definitely big bumps to guys like Devontae Parker and Gesicki here. So $5,000. I think he's fine facing the Jets. Shouldn't be concerned about their defense. Tyler Higbee, we already kind of talked about. Good spot here. Only $4,000. He's projecting well in the optimizer, so I think he's definitely worth a shot. And if you are stacking with Stafford, it's a nice cheap option to throw along there. James O'Shaughnessy and Brevin Jordan. So both in the same game here. Both they're cheap and both should see around 5 targets. It's not pretty. But if they happen to fall into the end zone, they can pay off their price points. Like Brevin Jordan scored a touchdown last week, so it was fine. He's like the bare minimum. And James O'Shaughnessy has seen 5 to 6 targets the past 3 weeks. Again, it's not pretty. They don't really do much with it. But if they happen to fall in the end zone, you won't be too discouraged of the output that they give you. I wouldn't expect 20-some points, but if they get you 6 to 8 points, you are doing cartwheels because you're excited. Because, I mean, the tight end position is gross, but it's just a dirt cheap option, which can allow you to get a guy like Cooper Kupp, and you will take any points you can get here. And then to finish this off with defenses, you know me, I don't really spend up. So while the Cardinals, Dolphins, and Cowboys and Eagles are viable on this slate, they're all large favorites. If I show you guys the Vegas totals here, 12.5 point favorites for the Cardinals, 9.5 for the Dolphins, 11 for the Cowboys, 9.5 for the Eagles. But I'm probably living in this bottom of 3 range. We have the Bills at $3,100. They're my favorite defense in the slate, my highest projected, and I assume they're going to be quite heavy chalk this weekend. But you know me, I have no problem playing the chalk defense. Only a 17-point implied team total against them. 10.5 point favorites. Love the Bills, and they actually do have a good defense. 49ers versus the Falcons, 9.5 point favorites. And the Jaguars, if you have to go cheap, it's never fun playing the Jaguars defense, but this game only features a 39.5 point over-under, and they're 5.5 point favorites with a 17-point implied team total against them, and they're facing the Texans. So if you have to go dirt cheap, I don't mind it, but the Bills, probably the best way to go in cash games this weekend. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, beneficial member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Cheat sheets, optimizers, ownership projections, all that fun stuff. You know where to find it. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks. Just you versus sign and as of right now, if you sign over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think that's going to be it. I'll get out of here and I'll see you guys tomorrow for lineup building in the core plays video. No, I'm not posting any content for the Saturday slate. It sucks. It's awful. The Browns are missing every single player. It's just not something I want to be a part of. But if you are playing it, I do wish you the best of luck.